Hello everyone, welcome back to part 5 of the Skull and Books paper mache tutorial. We covered a lot of ground on the last one. On this one we're going to cover even more ground. In the last tutorial we sculpted out all of our books. As you can see, mine are done. I do actually have one here, this one, and you could tell by the difference in the coloration of the clay that it's not completely dry, but it's dry enough for me to handle it, so that's going to be just fine. In this section of the tutorial we're going to be concentrating on finishing out, sculpting out our skull, and then we're going to attach the skull and we're going to attach those books together. Now, attaching the skull and the books together, again, like I said in the previous tutorial, is completely optional. You don't have to attach them together at all. You can leave them just separate and just stack them, and it might even be easier to store. But in case you did want to kind of stack them together permanently, I'm going to show you how to do that without using any glue. So yeah, it's like magic. But anyway, tools and materials, pretty similar to what we've been using. Paper mache paste, paper mache clay. I do have my resin skull here that I'm going to keep on hand to use as a reference when I am sculpting out my paper mache skull. And then if you have made your teeth, if you're going to use an air dry clay or an oven baked polymer clay such as Sculpey, you should already have those made and created if you're going to use those. If not, then you can go ahead and just sculpt them right into your sculpture. That's not a big deal, but I'm going to use these. And then of course your various smoothing and sculpting tools that you might want to need and have on hand. But I believe that is it. So let's get started on, first of all, the skull here. Alright, let's get right into sculpting out the skull. Before I begin though, you're probably wondering, or maybe some of you are wondering what this is. This is just a plastic, like a artist painting wheel. I like to use these. They come in handy. They're really cheap. You absolutely don't need to have one of these on hand to do this. I just happen to have one, and as you can see, I've used it quite a bit. But you can get these at any kind of art supply store, such as Michael's, or you can get them online pretty cheap. I think I spent maybe, I don't know, $13 for this thing. Anyway, we're going to get right into it. And I think what I want to do first is I want to concentrate on sculpting out the face here. So what I like to do is just, I'm going to put on a thin layer of clay. I normally, some of you have watched a lot of my videos, and this is how I normally start, with a, kind of a thin layer of clay. Nothing too big, nothing too bulky. And again, this is the Scarecrow Joe's studio clay that I use, using cellulose fiber insulation as my paper product. And I do have tutorials on how to make that, so if you're interested in that, those tutorials, there's 2 of them that are on my channel. One on how to make a small batch, the other one on how to make a large batch. So basically this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put a thin layer over the whole part of the front of this skull. Alright, next step, I'm going to take my paper mache paste and my paintbrush, and I'm just going to start smoothing it out using my paintbrush here and the paste. As you can see, I got the entire face, the front of the face, and I got over here to the jawline, up into the sides here, on both sides. That's as far as I got. I'm going to do this section by section. I like to get the face out of the way first, in case I get to a part where I feel like I need to stop and just let it dry so I can handle it without messing up anything on the face. The face is the important parts, not necessarily the back of the skull, although that will show, because this is a three-dimensional sculpture. So it is gonna show, of course, but your focal point is the face of your skull, not necessarily the back. Although we will be putting in some details into the back of the skull. What I'm doing here is I'm just making sure that where that wet clay kind of came over a little bit on the bottom of the jaw, that I'm just kind of feathering that in. I'm not very concerned about that at all, because no one's gonna see the bottom part, or really that part at all. This is just to get the layer of clay on there and smooth it out. So next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my again, you can use a spoon. That works really well, and just go in and smooth out your skull even more. Or, there's various other sculpting tools like this that are really cheap that you could pick up. I got these at Michael's, and they were really cheap. They came in a set of 4, I believe, and they were cheap too. They were probably like $10. That was a while ago, so price may have increased, of course. So I'm just going to continue on with my sculpting tool and smooth all of this out. Now, if you get to a point where you get tired, you need to take a break, like I said, maybe it's starting to feel like you can't handle it, as far as physically handling it, the piece itself without messing anything up, you can stop anytime you want and go back. The only thing that I want to point out is that if you do have these teeth, or if you're going to sculpt in some teeth at this point, you got to do it while the clay is wet, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring forward here my resin skull, and I'm kind of looking at the teeth. So it's only going to be, so imagine this part is gone. All right, that's gone, because we have the half skull here where we cut off that bottom part of our paper mache skull. So we're only concentrating on the top of the mouth, only the top teeth. So basically, you can see where the indentations of the eyes are, and we're going to go in and build up around it so it looks more sunken in, so don't even worry about that. But as you can also see, it comes in on this particular piece, the nose comes in, and then right about right here, and I'm just going to go ahead, and you could do this too, if you wanted a reference, a bigger, or not a bigger, but if you wanted a reference point where you should put your top teeth, you can go ahead and use that as a reference point. It doesn't have to be perfect, because again, we're going to go ahead, we're going to lay in some more clay. So as you can see, also see here, the teeth don't just come down right here, right underneath the nose cavity. There's all this bony structure in here, so we want to leave that. So we're going to say this is going to be all the bony structure in here. And again, we're going to clay this over. I'm just using this, again, I'm just using this as a reference point of where I want to put my teeth. So basically, I'm going to put my teeth right around in here. So what I want to do is, the clay is wet. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of paste. I have my teeth here. I have quite a few of them. And I'm just going to start laying them in. Just like so. You're just going to press them right into that clay. Let's go down a little lower. And as you could see, or hopefully you could see, on some of my teeth, before I baked it, I just took a little one of my little sculpting tools, or you could use your fingernail in the wet clay. You can make these indentations. So that looks like the teeth are a little bit chipped. And then also you can leave some gaps. You know, leave a gap or two if you wanted. That's not a big deal. Go ahead and leave a gap between your teeth, or if you don't want a tooth there at all, go ahead and not put a tooth in a section. Not a big deal. But basically, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to keep on laying in my teeth here. You can put in as many teeth as you want. So I have various sizes here. They're gonna get, you know, a little smaller as I go around. I think that is just fine. I'm just pressing in on the bottom here. Did have some clay that kind of got displaced. Not a big deal. But anyway, there you have it. And I'm gonna go ahead and just smooth that in because I'm not ready to sculpt in any details just yet. But for good measure, I'm gonna take my, I got a smaller brush here, and right around those teeth, because I wanna make sure that they are going to stick and adhere into that wet clay. I'm just taking some of my paste, and that should dry very well and harden. And let me bring this forward so you can see that. It will harden and stay in there permanently. No glue. All right. Now also in some of these areas where you can get in here, that's where that smaller paintbrush comes into play. It's easier to get in there with that smaller paintbrush than it is with the larger one. So that those will come in handy for you. So I've pretty much gotten all that smoothed in a little bit with my paste and my paintbrush. I'm going to go ahead and use my sculpting tool here, and I'm just going to go ahead and smooth it in even more. Always conscious of ridges, any kind of ridges that I may have inadvertently built up. You want to knock those down, blend them into the other clay that you already have on your piece. And that's what I'm doing right here with these ridges. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue on smoothing that in using my my little sculpting tool here. All right, I want to move on to the nasal cavity here. So again, I'm just taking pieces of my clay. That's probably too much. I'm just taking pieces of my clay, kind of making it into like a little coil, and I'm gonna lay it in. Just like that. Again, I'm kind of using this guy as a reference. I mean, it's not gonna come out completely the same, obviously. That's a resin skull. And this is a paper mache skull that we're making. So, there's going to be some differences there. But you'd be surprised on how much detail you could actually get in with using paper mache clay. It just sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and it takes more patience, of course, to build those areas up. So basically, I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just building up that nasal cavity. Now, some of you are perfectionists. I know this already. And you're going to spend a whole lot of time on this, trying to get it right, trying to make it look as organic as possible. And I think that's great. But one thing that I think is important for you to understand is that the human skull, humans are all unique. That means their skulls are unique. They're not going to be perfectly symmetrical or anything like that. So when you're creating these things, try to keep that in mind. I'm just going to go in here and I want to build up a little bit of a ridge in there. Go down a little further here. You really just have to get in and play with it, guys. I've got that in there. I'm going to go ahead with my paste. I'm going to use my smaller paintbrush here. Go in with my paste. Get some paste in there. Kind of smooth it out because it's pretty rough. I'm going to take my smaller little sculpting tool here. Go in and kind of just redefine some of these areas so that they're not so rough. Just kind of going in and pinching a little bit. Just sort of using my brush to kind of redefine the inside of that nasal cavity. And I know that this looks really, really big, this nasal cavity, but again, all of this is going to shrink down. So you got to keep that in mind. Always, always keep that in mind. If you want something more pronounced, you're going to build up more clay. If you don't want it so pronounced, then you're not going to build up as much clay. Kind of look at it from the side. Making sure that all of that is smoothed in so I don't have any ridges on either side here. Paintbrushes really do make really great sculpting as well as smoothing tools. Again, every time I go in and displace clay, I'm going back and I'm redefining those areas inside the nasal cavity there. Now, something else to keep in mind. You can wait for this to dry. See how it looks, and if there's some areas where you want to bulk up some more, add a little bit more clay, you could do that over that dry clay. That's not a problem. You just got to make sure that you're blending in your wet clay into the surface of your dry clay. Let's move on, and I'm going to come down in here and build up some of the bony structure where the teeth would be kind of attached to, I guess, to the jaw area. So again, I'm just taking bits of my clay and right above, like where the teeth are coming down, I'm just taking some of that clay overlapping a little bit of the top part of the teeth. I'm going to do that all the way around to the rest of my teeth here. Okay, paste. Again, using my smaller paintbrush, go in and apply that paste right over those areas where I bulked up. And then I'll go in and use my little sculpting tool, kind of redefine those areas. Alright, one last thing that I want to do as far as details on this particular skull is I want to bulk up a little bit more of the cheekbones here, just so they kind of stand out a little bit more. So again, best way to do this, because if you have a piece and you want it to be symmetrical, meaning both sides look pretty much the same, it's best to reach in, grab the same amount of clay, and you can already tell that this ball of clay here is a little bit bigger than the other one. So I'm just going to tear off from that one. And then I'm going to kind of compare now, and they look about the same. So that's one way to kind of ensure a little bit that both sides are going to be symmetrical because you're using about the same amount of clay for each side. And then of course you want to make sure that you're putting them on, again, the same areas. So you got to kind of look at it head on, look at it from the different angles. Guys, this is not an exact science, obviously, but just bulking up a little bit here and there in these areas is going to lend your skull a little bit more realism. You know, of course, it's not going to be perfectly realistic. You could certainly try to do that, you know, spend some time making it a little bit more realistic. You certainly can do that. Spend all the time that you want. I don't have all that time, and I want to get this tutorial done for you, so that's why I'm just kind of pressing forward, moving on. Not really spending a whole lot of time trying to detail out the skull. Just showing you the basic sculpting methods that I use. So again, with the paintbrush and the paste, I'm going in and I'm smoothing out that clay that I just kind of bulked on to these areas here. And then again, I'm going to go in with my sculpting tool and smooth that out. Kind of blend it, smooth it out even more on both sides. Alright, is it perfectly symmetrical? No, it is not. Do I care? No, I do not. Because once it's all put together and painted and everything, it's going to look pretty cool. Just like the other one that I did. A couple other things that you can do to refine your skull, make it look even more realistic is, and let me turn this one. You can put in around the jawline here, you can bulk that up a little bit, define that out. And the way to do that, and I'll go ahead and do that right now, again, because you want it to kind of be about the same size, you want it to be symmetrical, so I'm going in, I'm getting balls of clay here. I don't want to bulk it up so much that it detracts from the rest of the sculpt, but that's about the same. Maybe this one's a little bit bigger, not a big deal. Set one aside. And I'm squishing this clay down a little bit. I'm making a coil instead of a ball. And right around in this jawline, I just want to bring that up. Bring it right up in there. Just like that, so that I have a little bit more of a definition and a protrusion of that kind of this area here, or I'm sorry, this area in here. This is a half skull, so we're looking at a full skull, so that's half of what, so we're doing half of that basically. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll do the same side again. I'm going to squish it down. And, you know, kind of looking. You want to look at it at both angles. Bringing my clay up. We'll look at the other side here. Kind of compare them. And then once again, I'm going to use my smaller brush, and I'm going to go in and smooth it out with my paste. Alright, I added that little bit of detail there on the side of the jawline on each side. And you can really tell if it's going to be symmetrical or not by picking it up and looking at it from the bottom. And you can see where mine is not symmetrical. I've got more clay that comes in on this side than I do on that side. Again, I'm not going to worry so much about it. But if you are a perfectionist, you're going to go ahead and kind of tweak that a little bit more, add a little bit more to it to make it appear a little bit more symmetrical, and that's completely fine. we are now at a point, or I'm now at a point, where this is pretty much done. The face is done, for right now anyway. You know, if I was going to continue on this piece and I didn't have, you know, I wasn't filming a YouTube tutorial on this, I would probably just go ahead, let it dry, go back to it, see what I need to maybe refine it a little bit more, sculpt out some more detail. But again, for the purpose of this video and just getting it done for you, I'm going to call that face done. Next thing I'm going to do, pretty simple, and I don't think you guys need to watch me do this by any means, is I'm going to go in and layer on some more clay in all of these other areas where there isn't any clay. So everything that you see that has that raw paper mache, strip mache, I'm going to go ahead and layer on a thin layer of clay. When you get to this area up here where you have a little bit of a protrusion of your cardboard, your piece of cardboard sticking out, where you're going to insert your candlestick, you're going to want to make sure you've got enough clay around that edge, all the way around there. Let it come over a little bit, because once again, this is going to shrink. And this, probably more than anything, is something when this dries, you might have to go back and put in a bit more clay to kind of even it out. But other than that, I mean, the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to lay in some clay and then smooth it out with the paste and the paintbrush, and then take my sculpting tools and smooth it out even further. And then I'll come back and I'll show you what I do as far as putting in some more of the little fine lines and the cranial markings. Alright, so I went ahead and layered on some clay, clayed over the entire skull. Paid, again, particular attention to where my wet clay meets that dry clay that was there, and making sure that I smoothed that in and feathered it in so I don't have any big weird ridges. A word of caution here, because I did not sculpt this out in segments, say, you know, sculpt out the face and then let it dry, sculpt out the sides, let that dry, sculpt out the rest of the top and let that dry. Because of my own personal time constraints, I needed to get this done for you so that I can move on with the next things that I'm going to be doing. But by doing that, you know, I had to hold on to certain areas over here to sculpt in this area. And so I kind of, you know, I messed up some of the clay work up here. Not a big deal, because there's really not a whole lot of detail here. Just make sure if you're doing that, and you certainly can do that, or you can do it in segments and let it dry, you know, and then move on in different segments. Just make sure that you're not touching the face. You did all that work. You don't want to accidentally, you know, press in your face, so you have to go back and redo all of that work. So anyway, the very last thing that I want to do is, and if you could see on this particular skull, it has a lot of these cranial markings here. So I'm just going to go in and just put in some basic, you know, kind of lines. Let me move this camera up so you can see it. So again, careful not to mess up the face while I'm doing this. I'm just using my arrowhead shaped sculpting tool. You could use a toothpick, that will work fine. And I'm just going in and, you know, making those cranial markings. Something similar to what this skull has. You don't have to put these in at all if you don't want to. I mean, it's completely up to you on whether or not you want to do that or not. I think, you know, it's worth doing a little bit here and there. I think it does lend it a little bit more interest in certain areas. I'm going to do the back of the skull here too, put in some cranial markings. kind of coming down, that kind of thing. But like I said, you don't have to put any of them in at all if you don't want to. Also, I'm kind of looking at the side of this skull, and there's some other cranial markings there. Kind of go in and just press in some of those markings. Do the other side as well. You could even, you know, if you wanted to, put in some markings like maybe this particular skull or this person, when they were alive, had an injury to their face and had, you know, something like that going on. You can do something down here on the cheekbones, put in some markings, break it up a little bit, so that it looks like maybe there was injury to the bone structure in the face. So keep that in mind. I mean, get creative. This is your piece. Get as creative as you want. You go ahead and put in some markings in like the cheekbone area here. Basically anything that you think is going to lend this piece, your piece, a little bit more interest, I would go ahead and just put those things in there. But yeah, that's pretty much, I'm going to call this skull done. Alright, we're moving right along. Skull is done. Books are done. The only thing we need to do is attach them all together. And like I said before, this is optional. You can leave them completely separate. But before I show you how to do that, there is something else that I want to express to you as far as adding an additional creative element to your books. These look great, I think, when they're painted. They look awesome, as you can see back here. They look pretty cool, just like that, just with the clay. However, if you wanted to break up your textures a little bit, you could use, after you clayed it over, you can use like some tissue paper, or what I have here is basically, this is kind of like a thin sandwich type wrap or something like that. But you could use tissue paper that you, not toilet paper, but tissue paper like you buy for gift bags to kind of make gift bags look fancy. And you can just cut these up, dip them into your paper mache paste, and you could actually apply them to your book or one of your books, like maybe, you know, your middle book. And that will make it, give it the illusion of like a kind of a patchwork type of a leather binding on a book, if you will. So yeah, that's just a different creative element that you could use. And of course, you wouldn't have to do the whole thing. I mean, obviously you would have to wrap, you know, do that all around your edges, of course. But you wouldn't have to do it on the bottom if you are not going to adhere them all together. You wouldn't have to do them on the bottom of the book because no one's going to see that. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. If you wanted to add a different creative element to one of your books, or maybe all of your books, kind of break up the different textures, this is a really good way to do that. But anyway, moving on, I'm going to show you how to adhere these books together and the skull on top without using any kind of adhesives. Alright, we're in the home stretch, and as you can see, obviously this is not the skull I just sculpted out. This is my resin skull. I don't want to handle that skull quite yet. I'm not ready for it. But I just kind of stacked my books. I wanted to see how they're going to look, how I want to position them as in relation to my skull being on top. So that's what you'll do. You know, you'll kind of place them the way that you want, the way that you think you will want to have them stacked, because you're adhering them together and it's going to be permanent. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, so what I'm going to do here, I have my top book. I'm going to set that aside. This is my middle book here. I'm going to bring that over. First thing that I want to do is I'm going to take my paste, and I know that right in this section here, that's where it's going to be connected and adhered to. So I'm just putting on some paste, and then I'm going to go in here with some of my paper mache clay. I'm going to put some clay in there. I'm not completely flattening it out, but I'm putting enough clay in there. I would say this is probably maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch thick. But right around in here is where my book is going to adhere to my other book. So with that in place, I'm going to go in with more paste. Making sure I get a good amount of paste onto this clay here that I just put onto this book, my bottom book. You really want to make sure that it is saturated. If it's not, then, I mean, it'll still adhere, but you might have some problems. So I think that's probably good enough. I'm going to take my book. That's how I want it placed. I'm going to place it on there, and with some pressure, I'm basically just kind of smashing it down into place. Alright, just like that. Do the same thing. I got the paste on my book here, and I'm going to go in again with some of my clay. I don't know if you noticed, but I did actually end up removing this book and repositioning it because I decided I didn't like the way that it looked the way it was. But anyway, you can do that as long as it doesn't start drying, because then you'll have a mess on your hands trying to pry it off after it starts drying or after it is dried, and you'll damage your sculpture. So that's one of the downfalls is another one of the downfalls is that you can't reposition your books. They're going to be permanently in place using this technique. You know, not that big of a deal, but just keep that in mind. I just smooth that down a little bit, and I'm going to put in a bunch more paste. And this time, I want to make sure that this is how I want my book positioned. Now you could overnight, and this is what I do suggest if you're using this method to adhere them all together permanently. Get something heavy to put on top of these to weight them down. To ensure that they're going to get a really good bond. They're going to get a pretty good bond whether you do that or not, but it's best like if you have a cast iron pan or a skillet, something heavy like that. Put it on top of there to kind of weight it down. Alright, I probably should not be doing this because that skull is so wet, but again, time constraint for me personally, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach the skull. So same thing, I put some paste on the book, getting some clay on there. Just kind of smashing down that wet clay a little bit. I do recommend that you do wait until your skull is dry before attempting this. It's going to make it a lot easier on you. I'm going to try to pick up my skull here. Okay. Now by pressing this down, I am going to have to go in and redo some of this area up on top here, but not a big deal. But I'm going to go ahead and just press my skull down just like that a little bit. See? I messed it up. No big deal. I'm just going to come in here with my paintbrush, a little bit of paste, re-smooth that out. Good as new. The other thing that I suggest is that you take a look around your edges here. You're probably going to have some of that clay that you're going to see protruding out from where you stuck that clay onto the book. Go ahead and smooth that out and kind of blend it into your skull. And that's going to also help to ensure that it's going to get a good permanent bond to this. Just coming in here with one of my little sculpting tools and just trying to smooth it in a little bit more. Trying to be very careful and not dislodging my books from one another. But that's pretty much it, guys. One more time, let me move this. Let's take a look at it. And there you have it. We are done with the sculpt here. Yeah, wish me luck on how I put this together. This is, definitely one of those moments where it's do as I say and not as I do. As far as adhering everything, making sure stuff is dry, so on and so forth. So that concludes part 5 on the Skull and Books paper mache tutorial. We have completed our sculpture. Nothing more to do except for wait for it to dry before we go into painting. I'm going to let mine sit in front of a fan for at least 5, maybe 6 days. I want to make sure that it is completely dry before I go in and do any kind of painting. But that's going to be coming up in the next segment. We'll finish that up with the paint, and then we'll move on to more things. So as always, thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so, and I'll catch you in the next one.